Oh, welcome back, kiddies. Forgive me. Sometimes I get so choked up looking through these old family albums and scrapbooks. They make me so proud. And to think I knew them, back before they had all those lives on their conscience, all that blood on their hands. They had such potential. And they still do, after all. There's so many more lives worth taking in your world. Do you have any nooses swinging from your family tree? How many skulls are twisted in its muddy roots? Its gnarled branches grasping at the heavens like a pair of hands begging for mercy. They say you can't choose your family, but that isn't true. I've assembled some of the finest cases of the supernatural here in my chamber of atrocities. A foster home, if you will. And I've grown to love each of them, as any proud father would. I may have adopted them, but that doesn't mean I can't accept them as my own. We're torn from the same moth-eaten cloth. They're not only family, but my cast and crew. Tell me, what have you done? Confess your sins and we'll put them on your resume. Lucky for you, we're hiring. No? Well then, allow me to introduce you to them. My sons and daughters, my firstborn children of rot. Darken the room, and we shall commence. The deaths of Carol and Stephen Riggenberg shook the state of Oklahoma to its core. In the early morning hours of October 6th, 1984, police arrived at their residence in the city of Pitcher. The two had been bludgeoned to death, their skulls caved in by a rubber mallet left at the crime scene. Carol and Stephen's 7-year-old son Daniel was missing. Carol and Stephen were known addicts in the community and had been arrested before on numerous charges. This led authorities to believe the murder was indeed drug-related, and that Daniel was in serious danger. Andrea Ford, the guidance counselor at Pitcher Carden Elementary School, came forward detailing several disturbing sessions she had with Daniel. Daniel often spoke of the abuse he suffered at home, and of an imaginary friend he had named Bobo. Bobo he described as a clown with gray skin that would come to him at night. Daniel said Bobo was his friend, and that Bobo had a circus where little boys and girls could hide from bad mummies and daddies. Forever. Daniel vanished just days before Child Protective Services were scheduled to intervene. Joan Begley, the neighbor of the Riggenbergs who called 911, described to the operator a tall man in a clown getup circling the family's home. To make matters stranger, police that responded to the scene made note of a single blue balloon in the family's living room. Daniel Riggenberg was never found, and the murders of Carol and Stephen Riggenberg remain unsolved. The city of Pitcher, Oklahoma dissolved completely in 2013, leaving only a ghost town behind. In the years that followed, similar murders occurred across the country, resulting in missing children who had also described an imaginary friend they named Bobo. The most recent cases have occurred in North and South Carolina during 2016. No one is certain where Bobo began, or when Bobo will end. A note to all parents: remember to be good to your children, lest they run away to join the circus. Braulio Brothers Boardwalk and Amusements was a tourist mecca of New Jersey from the 1920s to the 1960s. They offered all the traditional dark ride attractions, sideshows, and most notably, an impressive penny arcade. Automatons from around the world were on display, all capable of doing the unlikeliest of tricks. The star of the show, however, was Lady Audley. Lady Audley is a fortune-telling machine of unknown origins, who was at the park since its beginning. Lady Audley seemed to have a life all her own. The cards she dispensed would predict the future, speak of the past, and know the present perhaps too well. She wouldn't respond to questions she felt were superfluous, and would volunteer information without being activated for subjects she felt important. Perhaps the strangest rumor was that no one was ever seen refilling the fortune-telling cards dispensed by the machine, which begged the question, where did they all come from? November 9th, 1964, the boardwalk was set ablaze, killing 32 people. Every attraction had been reduced to ash, and the first to burn was the arcade. The sole survivor was Lady Audley. The fire was determined to be a case of arson, and the man responsible was Harvey Markley. Mr. Markley was one of many who claimed that Lady Audley held a strange power over them. They became slaves to her predictions, and would travel nightly to the boardwalk, desperate to know what tomorrow may hold. Mr. Markley felt the only way to break the spell was with the cleansing purification of fire. When Mr. Markley was informed by detectives during questioning that Lady Audley had survived, Mr. Markley went mad. Markley, in a blind rage, attempted to kill the detective and was gunned down by the officers at the precinct. A bullet through the heart brought an end to Mr. Markley. A fortune-telling card dispensed by Lady Audley was found in his pocket. The card read, "From 6 chambers will come the stillness of life's regret. 4 chambers in a cage will be broken, but never will forget." Lady Audley traded hands for decades, until a former performer at the Braulio Brothers Boardwalk purchased her at auction. You're looking at the highest bidder. Artie Staggs was the funniest man in La La Land, a popular nightclub comedian in LA during the 1940s. His act was noticed by television producer Raymond Saylor, landing Artie the opportunity of a lifetime hosting WKLA's late-night comedy hour, The Last Laugh. The show premiered April 1st of 1952 and was an overnight success. Artie was well liked by everyone in Tinseltown. However, most would do anything for a shot at stardom. Rival comedians and a bitter ex-wife launched a smear campaign selling stories to tell-all tabloids. The stories were tawdry fodder to sell papers, but none were substantiated by fact. Their plans to hitch a ride on Artie's star backfired. The Last Laugh was canceled after only 4 episodes, and Artie was devastated. Near penniless and ruined by scandal, Artie checked into the Knickerbocker Hotel July 6th of 1952. Late that evening, a crash was heard from the hotel lobby by the desk clerk, Rex Borison. It was discovered that poor Artie had leapt from the window of his 11th floor room to the street below. A close friend, unfazed by rumors, identified the body and paid for Artie's cremation. It's the least I could do. His ashes were scattered in his hometown of Little Hope, Indiana. However, that wasn't the last punchline for Artie Staggs. A mystery that became the stuff of Hollywood legend soon unfolded. Teddy Ferguson, Milford Ramler, Tommy Harns, and Glenn Maverick, all comedians involved with the magazine stories, were found dead, with smiles on their faces. Stranger still, it is said, they were discovered in front of their unplugged or smashed-in televisions, still playing static with the faint sound of an echoing laugh track. His ex-wife, Angelina Martino, was found in her penthouse suite, paid for by Staggs' alimony, after a wellness check by LAPD. The scene was so gruesome it was thought to be an attempted Black Dahlia copycat. Angelina's mouth had been split ear to ear, fashioning a crude smile carved into her face. Angelina never identified her attacker, Due to a hysterical nervous breakdown, she never spoke again. Angelina lost everything, her stunning good looks and her mind. According to some, her television was also on, the screen filled with static, with the faint sound of an echoing laugh track. Though all the episodes of The Last Laugh have been lost with time, the tragic tale of Artie Staggs is still remembered today. Laughter may be the best medicine, but sometimes it is a bitter pill to swallow. The amazing Tristan was the greatest magician known to vaudeville. His shows defied logic and astounded even the most hardened skeptic. Perhaps the most astonishing facet of his performance was the closing act. Tristan would explain to his audience that ventriloquists merely gave their puppets a voice, while he could invoke in them life itself. The magician's assistant would then roll out a large red box, branded in golden letters, Bugsy. Tristan would implore the spellbound theater to focus their thoughts and energy on the crate, and from this, Bugsy would live. Bugsy, once removed from the box, seemed to be alive. He could mimic the voice of theatergoers and play the requests at his tiny piano. Before their very eyes, Bugsy could even stand to take a bow. The banter between Tristan and Bugsy was often amusing. However, with the final days of vaudeville, it took a sinister turn. Fumbling over lines and visibly shaken, Tristan's confidence had seemed to waver. Bugsy would antagonize the audience and berate an often inconsolable Tristan until they brought the curtain down. Realizing that vaudeville had fallen out of favor, some think Tristan took to drinking. A fellow magician, Marius the Great, was interviewed in 1968 by historian Stephen Schreiber for his book, Vaudeville, The Last Sensation. Marius, when asked about Tristan, suggested he had dabbled in things far beyond smoke and mirrors. When asked what this meant, Marius refused to elaborate. Tristan was last seen alive in 1934 at his summer house overlooking Lake Delhi in Iowa. The mystery came to a tragic end in July of 2010. Storm waters broke the southern dam of Lake Delhi, and rapid erosion drained it completely. At the bottom of the lake was a rusted 1927 Studebaker. Behind the wheel was the skeletal remains of the amazing Tristan, and in the seat behind him was Bugsy's red trunk. The lid to the trunk had been hastily nailed shut, and upon opening, it was discovered that Bugsy was still inside. Despite having been submerged for 76 years, Bugsy was somehow unscathed. A group of historians took it upon themselves to have Bugsy delivered parcel post to Venthaven in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky. Venthaven being a museum dedicated to preserving the history of ventriloquism. While en route, via I-74, Bugsy and his trunk vanished. If anyone knows where Bugsy is today, it is likely you won't see their lips moving. After all, he is much happier where he is today. Aren't you, Bugsy? We'll climb up.
You know they called me the dummy of the act? What kind of a magician has a vanishing act that lasts 70 years? What a drip. Without me, he's all washed up. His career has gone down the drain. Talk about a weekend bender. He's had 70 years and he still ain't dried up. It's no surprise, though. He always was a wet blanket. What kind of failure manages to park his car in the towaway zone at the bottom of a lake? You want to know his final words?
Of course.
So do I. It's hard to hear inside that trunk. Maybe he died asking for directions.
Step this way, the strangest sights on the island. Bricks from the four corners of the world. 42 nickels, 1 dime, a tenth part of $1. We've got the show if you've got the dime.
Rarely does the truth present itself in the ballyhoo of a carnival barker. but a live exhibit displayed by Serpico's Cabinet of Wonders needed no exaggeration whatsoever. Just beyond the gaff banners, and past the Museum of Oddities, it paced behind iron bars. The brave, for just a small fee more than admission, could look into its flaming eyes. This abomination was referred to simply as the Beast, and there its story was told. A thief pillaging the ancient tombs and ruins of Hierapolis in Turkey discovered the creature. This sprawling necropolis was considered the sacred domain of Pluto, the god of the dead. Deep within its cavernous hillsides, the gates of the underworld are said to exist, and it is there the beast would wander. The creature was immune to the toxic fumes emitted deep from within its earth, and survived on the carcasses of animals sacrificed to our good old friend Hades. Professor Julian Abbandonato, the proprietor of Serpico's Cabinet of Wonders, was traveling Europe and heard the thieves' tale. By means unknown, Abbandonato captured the creature and had him smuggled into America. The beast was described as standing 7 feet tall, its body emaciated, its face vaguely simian, and its skin covered with lesions. Despite the grimness of the creature's visage, it seemed relatively meek until provoked by Abbandonato. A tactic he often employed to shock the audience with the beast's violent reactions. Serpico's Cabinet of Wonders, like many sideshows, would retire to GIBSONTON, Florida in the off-season. In the winter of 1972, they would for the last time. On the morning of January 8th, it was discovered that the grounds and property of Julian Abbandonato had vanished entirely. The estate and all its curiosities, the beast among them, had been swallowed back into the earth, engulfed by an enormous sinkhole. A former investor of Serpico's Cabinet of Wonders was interviewed by a local paper in the days that followed. When asked about the star attraction, he responded simply, "No longer will he be subjected to the cruelties of man. He is somewhere now that his soul can rest." Florida in recent years has garnered quite the peculiar reputation for tragedy. Perhaps the presence of the beast opened the very pits of hell. Sinkholes continue to plague Florida today. Of course, they're only sinkholes, aren't they? You may be asking, where is the beast lurking? But as I told that damn reporter, he's somewhere safe from prying eyes. Luckily for you, he was fed earlier and has gone to bed. You may be wondering how I got my hands on all this evidence. Well, one must only know how to ask, and they shall receive. Speaking of which, I'll ask only once more. Won't you join my cast? There's no audition to get into my show. All that we ask for is your immortal soul. As far as I'm concerned, you've already clocked in for your first shift. You have talent, kid. We've already drawn up a contract. Don't you want to be a star? After all, you could be our next show subject of interest. Now, remember me as you sign the line. If you liked our show, then please subscribe. As we are now, so you must be. Prepare for death, and sign for me.